if you make an error, if you dwell on the error, then you're actually hurting your team and you're hurting your own performance. It's being able to, okay, I made an error, but I've got to get to my next job. So what's important now? What's important in this play, this tackle, this set? But I've got to be me and I've got to be the best version of me. And so that's sort of what gets me out of bed. And as I said, I've probably learned over the journey. Be curious, and the other thing is persevere. Like anyone who's had success has had to persevere. Things happen for a reason, but I certainly learnt more from the failures and the hurdles than I have through the little sort of successes I've had.
Hi, I am Tatjana Pandurevic, and welcome to Moonshot, a space where comfort zones don't exist. Having spent most of my life scared to take risks, the one thing I am seeking now is to be surrounded by more people who are courageous, bold, unafraid, and relentless in their pursuit for success to help inspire me and hopefully you. In this podcast, we dive deep into the minds of individuals who see no limits, those who dream big and defy boundaries. Today on Moonshot, I'm thrilled to be joined by Anthony Seibold, head coach of the Manly Warringah Sea Eagles. Anthony's journey spans from playing rugby league at the highest levels with teams like the Canberra Raiders, London Broncos, and Hull Kingston Rovers to becoming one of the most respected coaches in the NRL. His coaching career includes leadership roles with the Melbourne Storm, South Sydney Rabbitohs, Manly Sea Eagles, and even serving as assistant coach for England's national rugby union team. In the 2024 NRL season, Anthony led the Manly Sea Eagles through a year marked by resilience, growth, and determination, guiding the team to one of their best performances in recent years. In today's episode, we'll dive into Anthony's approach to high performance and leadership, how he prepares his team for the mental and physical demands of finals football, and his strategies for building a high-performing team dynamic. We'll also explore the valuable lessons Anthony has drawn from his playing days and how they've shaped his coaching philosophy. If you're interested in leadership, high performance, and overcoming challenges to achieve success, this is an episode you won't want to miss. Let's dive in. Anthony, thank you for joining the Moonshot podcast. You have a track record of success at the highest levels, and I can't wait to get into all things high performance and leadership with you. You've just come off the back of a great season with the Sea Eagles. Now that you've had a few weeks to reflect since the finals, what are your key takeaways from the season?
Well, it's great to be here and chat. I think some of the key takeaways for us is we always look at evidence and what's the evidence to suggest that we're making gains, year upon year. And the gains that we made this year, it's a really intense competition, the NRL. But of the other 8 finalist teams, we beat 6 of the 7. So obviously we're included in the 8. So we beat 6 of the 7. So it shows that we can beat the high performing teams in the competition. I think the other thing we've seen is, we've improved sort of both sides of the footy. I think, we ranked 5th in attack, we ranked 7th in defence. So we're making some strides forward, and there's still a gap there between us and the top couple of teams in the competition. There's no doubt about that. So we're always working towards that. But I think the evidence suggests that on our day we can beat anybody, and it's now around building some consistency in our group and our performances. But I really enjoyed the year, albeit would have loved to been part of the grand final. But we were knocked out week 2 of the playoffs. But certainly some good strides forward for us.
No, it was definitely a remarkable season, and you also had to overcome a lot of ups and downs with the team, especially with a few of your key players battling with injuries. A standout moment for me was the win against the Bulldogs, where Pandurevic set up the game-winning play despite being injured. That kind of victory must have a big impact on overall confidence. How do you keep the team motivated through challenges and setbacks throughout the year? Because it's still a fairly long season.
Yeah, it's a really demanding season, and you're right. I think there's 27 rounds and you play 24 games of those 27, so you get some bye weeks, but it's really demanding. And so planning your weeks, with regards to the intensity of training, the volume you do at training, you need to make sure that that's sort of periodised and planned throughout the season. You need to make sure there's a fun element to it because it's a really tough physical game. So there needs to be a bit of downtime. There needs to be time where you find that balance between working really hard, preparing for games, but then enjoying each other's company. And, connections are a really important piece that, I've worked out as a coach. You need to have a connected group, staff, players, and you need to be deliberate around that. So that's one of the things that we do, during the season. But, yeah, you're right. Like, our first finals victory was a really good game for us with regards to we were sort of being suffocated by the Bulldogs and we just kept hanging in. The scoreboard didn't get away from us and we're able to produce a really stunning play, in the last sort of 5 or 6 minutes to get a result there. So really proud of that. I think in the past we probably wouldn't have won a game like that. So that's sort of the growth that we made this season.
It was such a remarkable game. When you say you're being deliberate about the fun element, what does that mean? How do you build that into the season?
Well, I think if you make it part of your schedule, the players understand that it's important. So during the pre-season, we actually developed these groups called DOCS groups, which are duty of care groups, and they're groups of 6 players and 1 staff member, and we actually put it in our schedule on a Tuesday. And so it's part of the schedule and, a player in the group gets to choose what activity. So whether it's 10-pin bowling, going to the golf range, going playing golf, just going for lunch, going for coffee, going for a swim at the beach, whatever it is, it's in the program. And this past pre-season, we did it 1 p.m. Till 2 p.m. every Tuesday. So the players understand that it's important because it's part of the schedule. And things that are part of the schedule, they understand are really important. So that was a sort of starting point. We have these groups of 6. The other thing that we did was when we went to Las Vegas this year, we went over to Las Vegas early and we spent the whole time in Las Vegas. And we actually allowed the guys for the first 2 or 3 days to essentially be like tourists and go and look at, the Grand Canyon, go and look down the strip, walk down the strip.
Have no prescriptive schedule.
Yeah, and just allow them to go and experience it. And I learned that from my time with England Rugby. What they did exceptionally well was go to wherever they were playing. We had a test series. You go there early, and the first day or 2, you just allow the players and the group just to experience it. And so that's what we did. So, there's all these little elements along the way. It gets harder in season because you don't want to take time away from the players, partners, families, kids or whatever. So a few things that we did there was, get the players to bring their kids in on our last training session of the week. And I'd get my daughters to mind the kids and while the guys were doing their work. And then it was great to see all the kids would run on the field and have a kick with their dad or pass with their dad. So just things like that, having that fun element where, the kids are on the field running around. And, so there's, we're really deliberate around how we drip feed that into our program. Because at the end of the day, rugby league's a really tough sport. And, obviously with, how big it is here, and particularly on the east coast of Australia, there's a real seriousness to it and there's a real critique from media, social media, et cetera. So there's a lot of that around our sport, but you need to make sure there's time for fun.
That's brilliant. I love how deliberate and intentional that is, but it's bringing back that sense of connection on a regular basis for the team as well. And it must also alleviate the pressure. Otherwise, it would be too much at a high for too much of a sustained period as well throughout the season, and it must create a nice balance as well. The pressure of finals can be immense, and you made it to the second week of the playoffs. What does preparation look when you're going into the finals? Yeah, so
again, we've done all the work, as far as the preparation concerned. So certainly the volume for us, and look, we're not like a Penrith who've won 4 premierships in a row or a Melbourne Storm who have been, successful for a sustained period of time. Over the last sort of decade, we've only made the playoffs, 4 times. So it was a big step in the right direction. Historically, Manly have had great success in the 70s, 80s, 90s and in the 2000s. So there's been this, windows of success for our club. And so for one reason or another, we haven't been able to have that success over the last sort of 10, 11 years. So we felt as though we made some strides forward. Big step forward for us was winning a final. And part of our preparation was making sure that we keep our intensity, but the volume drops off because we've done a lot of the hard work. And
throughout the season.
Yeah, throughout the season. And I think big games, in my experience coaching in whether it's been rep footy or, finals, finals aren't going to be perfect. And so that's okay. So it's the team, or individuals that move on quickest. And we spoke, before we did this around tennis and the mental side of tennis. It's the same in rugby league. It's like if you make an error, if you dwell on the error, then you're actually hurting your team and you're hurting, your own performance. It's being able to, okay, I made an error, but I've got to get to my next job. So what's important now? What's important, this play, this tackle, this set. And so, a lot of our language was around not going to be perfect, but we've got to move on quickest. And and being able to handle the chaos. And we weren't able to handle the chaos in week 2 of the playoffs against the Roosters. We had 2 players concuss the first 2 tackles of the game, which was crazy.
I don't think I've ever seen that.
No, I certainly haven't.
It was almost within the first 40 seconds.
It was. We'd lost 2 really influential players. And we were on the back foot from there and we weren't able to handle that chaos. And that's okay. That's a work on for us. But it's about, again, not overworking the group. We need to make sure that we go in there, understand it's not going to be perfect and work really hard for each other. We spoke about connection off the field, but that connection on the field is really important. It's, it's an area that we're still working towards, because we aspire to get to, week 4 of the playoffs, which is the grand final and have success there. But, it's a journey and, we got a lot of learnings out of this year.
Well, you just spoke and we talked earlier about just the mental impact of a lot of other sports, particularly in tennis. Rugby's quite a physical sport. How much does the mental element come into the game? How important is it?
Enormous. And I think if I was to look over historically the last 20 years since, I finished playing, getting into coaching, you always had the technical, tactical and physical elements. And they weren't necessarily integrated. They're probably in silos in a lot of ways, but they were really 3 important sort of streams to your program. I think the area that has, had significant growth probably over the last, probably 7-8 years, particularly in rugby, in the rugby codes is the mental aspect and then how you integrate that, like what you do in the gym has to transfer to the field. Otherwise, there's no point doing it. And it's the same from a mental point of view. And so we work with a guy called Andrew May who has worked with Cricket Australia, Cricket New South Wales, Parramatta Eels when they made the grand final a few years ago. He works with Tim Zhu, the boxer, currently. Works with people like the Commonwealth Bank CEO, Matt Common. So works with, a vast array of individuals in sports business. And the thing that we tried to do in our program is integrate it, make it, normalise that mental skills and working on or personalising individual tools for players and staff is something that can take us to the next level. And, all the really good teams that you see have had success, they have mental skills coach, they work on mental skills. So, we do things like we have mindfulness sessions. We use visualisation through the use of scripts. We also look at how we can minimise the interference or the distractions during the week. And so you can imagine there's a lot of interference, a lot of distractions for players. So whether it's social media, whether it's critique or praise, people wanting tickets, or, just imagine 1,000, bits and pieces that are distractions or interfere with the players. So, we're really deliberate around how we can have a better week. What's a better week look like from a mental side of, point of view, and things like not looking at your phone straight away when you get up in the morning. Have half hour where you're just away from the phone. So there's all these little things that we've tried to implement over the last 2 years. And again, it's a work in progress for us. But the whole idea is that it needs to be part of our program. It's integrated into our program every day, like gym is, like wrestle is, like the tactical, technical on the field is.
It's so important. And I know you just brought up the media. And again, I draw from my experience from tennis or even just watching, and there's been some great Netflix series recently on the behind the scenes of professional athletes. And you can see if there's a controversy or a player's not doing well, like something as simple as that over a number of different tournaments, the media can be brutal. And you can tell when the players are consuming too much of that negativity, it really starts to impact them as well, and it just perpetuates the problem. I guess it's easier said than done to block out a lot of the distractions as well, and you're talking about bringing them into the program. But what does the best week, a 10 out of 10 week, look like for the team in terms of prep and getting ready for a game?
Yeah, well, like you always aspire to be 10 out of 10. And the reality of it is that doesn't always work, because players, staff, they have real lives. They've got partners, kids, so, mums, dads, life happens, right? So it's never going to be perfect. But, things like, as I said, adding sort of mindfulness or breathing as part of our program, some visualization as part of our program. Down regulation is really important. So down reg is where you just take time at the end of our last training session, which we call game rehearsal. So the day before the game, just out on the field, in the sun, just taking 5 minutes of yourself to down reg, or when they go into the ice baths, that's obviously creates a bit of anxiety and a bit of tension. But then when they're in the heat, whether it's a sauna, just take some time to live in their own thoughts. And it doesn't have to be perfect, their mind races, but just be really deliberate around breathing and down regulation. So we have all these bits and pieces during the week. The best week for the players is again. To have a think about what a really good day looks like for them. So it's about, not being on their mobile phones or social media accounts at the start and the end of the day. Being really deliberate around, okay, the first 30 minutes and the last 30 minutes of the day, it's almost like I'm going to leave the phone, leave the social media, et cetera, alone. It's about if, they've got family or friends coming to the game, making sure they organise their tickets early in the week. So on game day, they're not getting texts saying, can you leave me 2 tickets at this gate or that gate? Because, again, these are like, you might think, well, how's that a distraction? It is on game day because, you love your family, you love your friends coming to watch you, but, it can be a distraction at times on game day if you run around looking for tickets. It's around making sure you take the content of the week, so rather than think about 10 things, really narrowing your focus. So what's the 2 or 3 things that are really important in my role for this particular game? So it's about narrowing your focus, minimising the distractions, using the personalised tools that work for you, because visualisation doesn't work for everybody. So working out what works for you. Is it breathing? Is it visualisation? Is it the use of scripts? Is it the use of down regulation? Whatever it is, personalising that. And I think the other thing for us as a work on is how do we then handle chaos? Because in invasion sports like rugby league, AFL, soccer, there's momentum swings. And then when you have the momentum, taking advantage of that, and when you don't have momentum, how do you try and break that pattern? So they're the key things for us.
Really amazing techniques, and thank you for sharing them. How do you prepare for the chaos? You talked earlier about the final game in the playoffs, and that was a really, really intense start, very unusual
chaotic start to
a game.
Yeah, it was.
But how do you prepare for that?
Well, you do it by your training, and again, I'll say this: this is a work on for us, and so. We're doing some planning at the moment. How can we create a bit more chaos at training? So it might be something as simple, our Friday sessions when we go back into pre-season, instead of being like, I've got a bit of OCD, right? So I'm super organised. And so the players know where they need to be at exactly what time. So we're thinking about ideas like, do on a Friday during pre-season, do we just say, this is your arrival time, this is your end time, and then on a needs-to-know basis, once they're in there, tell them this is your next job or this is your next job, so they can't prepare mentally for what's coming up. So we're thinking about, doing something like that, so every second Friday during pre-season, that's a bit chaotic, right? Because they're so used to reading their schedule. Okay, forwards have to be in the gym at 9, or we have to be on the field at 10:30, or we're doing our bulletproofing at 11 o'clock, or mental skills is 11:30. So just saying, right, arrive at 7:30, and you're going to be gone by 3:30, and then it'll be needs to know. So something like that. Training, you can create sort of chaos at training by overloading one team with extra players and underloading another team with extra players. So it might be 14 v 12. So there's. That's creating a bit of chaos because
natural pressure for the team that's under resourced.
We create some scoreboard scenarios, so down by 4 with 6 minutes to go, up by 4 with 6 minutes to go, as an example. So you're creating some scoreboard pressure, and then the chaotic part of it is you get the referees to be deliberate about not calling a knock on, and then see how they handle that. So there's all these little things, and most clubs are doing these things. But, for us, we're just trying to devise some ways where we can create a bit more chaos because, at times in games, it's an area for us to continue to grow.
Yeah, it's inevitable. Chaos ensues. And like you said, the better the team get at handling that in those high pressure moments in game, the more consistent you can be, particularly through toward the back end of the finals. Shifting gears to your career, you've had an impressive career both as a player and a coach. What early experiences, either in life or rugby, shaped your approach to leadership and high performance?
Yeah, well, I think my actual playing career, I probably can, I describe myself as a journeyman. Had a really, really elite sort of schoolboy junior career. I went to the Brisbane Broncos and they were winning multiple premierships at the time. So I was in reserve grade. I actually played reserve grade at 17, which is very young, but I never played first grade there. And that's something that in some ways I've had, some regrets about, that I didn't get an opportunity to play first grade, but ultimately I wasn't good enough to play first grade at that particular club. The lessons I learned from there was, just about probably backing myself a little bit more. Like in my head, I thought, I can't make this first grade side. They're all state of origin players, they're all test players. And probably, you talk about the mental side. I wish I had someone to help me with, unpacking that and working out, okay, well, maybe for me, success is about making my debut there and playing 2 or 3 games there at that particular club. And it wasn't until I went to Canberra Raiders and a lady by the name of Gayleen Clues was our sports psych. And I ended up playing first grade there, and he was a very, very talented side as well, similar success rate to the Broncos in the 90s, late 80s and the 90s. So I reckon one of the lessons was around how important the mental side of things is. And like you've got so much talk inside your head, your inner critic or your self-talk, whatever you want to call it. I wish one of my learnings was I'm so much better at that now as an older person than I was when I was a young player. I wish I knew how to control that inner critic or that self-talk when I was a young guy, like I can now. So that's one lesson. And I don't know whether that's leadership, but that's certainly one lesson I took away. And I think the leadership aspect that I've learned over the journey as a coach is not everyone's going to like your decisions, but if you make them for the right reasons, and the right reasons are putting the team first. So whenever I drop a player, select a player, move a player on from our roster, it's not because I don't like that person, and it's not a critique of that person, but it's trying to make a decision that I think is best for the team, whether it's for that season, whether it's for that week. And so leadership's hard, leadership's difficult, and it's not for everybody, and you don't always get it right, and certainly I haven't always got it right. In actual fact, I made a whole heap of mistakes, but I've learned from them. And so just understanding that, not every decision as a leader is going to be popular, but as long as I go back to, is this the right decision for the team, and everything's about for the team, then I can live with that criticism or that, not necessarily popular decision.
So you're also in a position that's highly critiqued on a weekly basis. Where did you develop that resilience? Is it just through years of experience? Were you deliberate in learning about these mental techniques? How did you really develop that throughout your career?
Well, probably both those points. It's comes with some experience of being critiqued and then how you handle it, and then I think actually developing some tools. I spoke about personalising mental skills tools for players. I think it's really important for coaches and particularly head coaches. So when you're an assistant coach, you're like the big brother. And I was fortunate enough to work at clubs like Melbourne Storm as an assistant, Manly as an assistant, South Sydney as an assistant, with the Queensland State of Origin side as an assistant, England Rugby as an assistant. So I've had all these wonderful experiences. And for the most part, they were super, super positive experiences. And when you're an assistant coach, your name's not on the news or the back page of the paper. As I said, you're like the big brother. So I had all these wonderful experiences, and I feel like, hopefully I added to the groups that I was in, whether it's with the other staff or with the players, but they're certainly in my mind like really positive experiences. When I got a head coaching role, things went really well, really early. And I was fortunate enough to win a Dally M Coach of the Year award in my first year. We made the preliminary final. And so there was all this positive, media around me and et cetera. And then I probably made an unpopular decision, went to another club, and the narrative in the media really turned. And I really struggled to handle that negativity after having so much sort of positivity or not having the experience of having negative criticism.
That much adversity.
Yeah, and it was really, really difficult. I've got to say it was really difficult. And I took it really personally. And so I think when I stepped outside the game for, NRL for 2 years, I was still working as a coach with England Rugby, but I was doing some media, and I understood probably that a lot of the comments aren't personal. It's just someone's opinion. They're paid to give their opinion. and how you handle that you're in control of. And that's where I think I work really closely with Andrew May, and he's been excellent for me as far as, how do I separate the day? Like when I go home, like if I go home and if I walk upstairs and my wife asks me to unpack the dishwasher and I've just had a really sort of crappy conversation, whether it's with, I don't know, whether it's with a player, a staff member, player manager, whatever it is, or, sometimes you're not in the mood to do that. So I try and separate the day, have a sauna when I get home. I put a sauna in it at home. So that almost like separates the day. Go do that. If I've had a crappy day, it's just sort of 10 or 15 minutes of down regulation, in a sauna. Then I go upstairs and then I'm dad or husband and so on. So being really deliberate with some things like that. But yeah, it was a work on. I think when you're an assistant coach, you're not prepared for the constant critique and so on. And then, as I said, I had a really positive first sort of 12 months as a head coach. And then it's been really bumpy since then. And so, but I understand it's not personal. Well, I don't think it's personal. I don't take it as personal. So I feel like I handle it better. And but it's more your family sees the criticism and how they take that. You can't control that. But yeah, try and have really deliberate sort of tools in place. But it's the nature of the role, and it's one of the reasons that gets me out of bed every day. I want to continue to be the best coach I can be. Am I going to be Wayne Bennett or Craig Bellamy? No, but I've got to be me, and I've got to be the best version of me. And so that's sort of what gets me out of bed. And as I said, I've probably learned over the journey some tools and some experiences.
I love the way you talk about that, and it makes me think of a couple of different things. The first one is compartmentalizing, and it's not easy, and I keep using the word deliberate, but you really need to be deliberate about it. And I listened to a senior business executive once talk about this exact same concept, which is you've had a bad conversation, you've lost a big deal, something's happened at work, you've had an unpleasant conversation. And the way that he talked about it was he'd be driving home, and just before he goes inside to see his family, he's like, you go to work and you're really intentional about bringing your A game. Your family, and he said, for him, this was something he was working on, but your family deserved your A game. So he would sit in his car, and this would be, I guess, his sauna moment where he'd be feeling exactly kind of his frustrations out, and he'd be just kind of visualizing, all right, he's coming now home to his family. They deserve his A game, and he'd be resetting in his car. So when he steps out of his car door, he's there and he's present and he's happy and he's not carrying through his emotions from the day. But it's kind of similar to the exact way you've got to compartmentalize what's happening throughout your day.
Yeah, and I think I've got better at that. I think when I was in Brisbane, I just couldn't, I was just in this, in a cyclone, so to speak, and I couldn't compartmentalise. And I'm not perfect, don't get me wrong. There'll be still times when, I try and compartmentalise it by having a sauna to separate the day and walk upstairs and you're not the best husband or the best dad in the world. So don't get me wrong, I'm not perfect, but I'm really deliberate around trying to, trying to end one day and then start the next day. I think that's really important. And I've done a much better job of that. I try not to bring work home anymore. I live 3 minutes from my office. So I almost try and separate the two. When I'm in at work, I'll go in on a Sunday, So I'm in there from, say, 1 to 4 o'clock on a Sunday afternoon. No one knows you're in there. But instead of working at home, in the office at home, I'll go into my office because that's a workspace. So then when I'm home, it's not work, if that makes sense. So I'm fortunate that I live close to work there. And when I'm in there, it's work time. And when I'm home, I try and make it.
You're at home. Yeah. When you were a player yourself initially. I just want to understand, how did you make that transition into being a coach? Because it can be tough, but was there philosophies that you learned as a player or experiences you had that you wanted to bring into coaching? Where did that motivation come from? Yeah,
well, the motivation come from I was 17 and I signed for the Brisbane Broncos. There's a great person there called Cyril Connell, who was an old school teacher, great recruitment person for Wayne Bennett, old school teacher, old school principal, worked for the Education Board. He encouraged me to do teaching. He said, wherever you go in the world, they always want teachers. So I sort of chose teaching over being a police officer. They were the two in my head that I wanted to be. And I was from regional Queensland, right? So I went to university, and by the time I was 21, I'd done a 3-year teaching degree, it was back then, and I was teaching year 6. So I was literally teaching 11-year-old kids, and I was 21. And so I probably didn't really understand myself as a 21-year-old, I've got to say, looking back on that. But rugby league wasn't full-time. rugby league was still part-time. So this is before the Super League wars come in 1995, or just as they come in, to be fair. And so I was part-time playing reserve grade for Brisbane Broncos and then full-time working during the day. So I think the teaching, and then what I should say, rugby league then went full-time. I went full-time. I went over to Europe and played an off-season in France, and then I signed the Canberra Raiders, and then I went back over and played in the Super League for London Broncos. So there was this period of 5-6 years, or then I went back to Hull Cows. So there's a period of where I went full-time as a rugby league player. But I had my teaching degree and I'd already done a year. So when I had a bad injury, which was an ACL reconstruction, I come back to Australia from England and I taught for a year again. And so...
Went back into school teaching?
Yeah, I went back into school teaching, while I was recovering, because back in those days it was a 9 to 12 month injury. And so this is 2001. I came back to Australia and I, recovered, did my rehab for my knee back here in Australia. Then I went back over to the UK and finished playing footy over there. But I had teaching to fall back on. And when I was coming back teaching, I was coaching the first 13 or the under 13As, I started coaching. And so that sort of led to becoming a coach post-career. And probably a really pivotal moment was a guy called John Dixon, who'd worked with Wayne Bennett for 10 years. John was coaching the Clydesdales, who were the reserve grade Broncos side, in 2005. I was coming back and I was retiring from footy and I was going back to teach at a school in Brisbane. And he said, would you play one more year? You can be captain, help, with some of the coaching and mentoring of all these young guys. And there were guys like Berrick Barnes, who become a great Wallaby, Sam Thaiday, who become a great, premiership winning player. Played for Australia. Tom Leroy-Lars played for Australia. Nev Costigan played for Australia. There's all these young men who were there. So I was about 10, 12 years older than these guys. And so I played with them, did some mentoring with them. And that really whet my appetite because I learned a heap from John, and being back in the Broncos environment, I learned a heap. So that, the teaching, the coming back to, have one more year playing when I wasn't going to in the Queensland Cup, really probably sort of whet my appetite to become a coach.
You've got a lot of unique experiences because, as you mentioned, you've coached across rugby league and rugby union. Is there any learnings that you gained from coaching across both leagues that enhanced or improved yourself as a coach?
Oh, definitely, because I come from a rugby league background. So when Eddie Jones, who's, a world-class coach, I know things didn't go great in his last experience of the Wallabies, but he's a phenomenal coach. And so he reached out to me after I finished coaching at the Broncos and offered me a role. And initially it was like a consulting type role where I was based in Australia, and then he asked me to come over full time to be senior assistant coach looking after the defence there. And so I'm an Aussie from Rockhampton, from rugby league, and I'm flying on the plane over to England for the first time to go to London, Twickenham, with rugby union, and I'm thinking, you talk about like a bit of imposter syndrome. I'm thinking, how can I help these guys? I'm not from this sport. But I really worked out that, going back to being really confident in what I do well, which is like teach. I've been a teacher. I know how to teach. I feel like, communication's one of my strengths in front of the group. So I just thought I can help them, and I can help them with defensively, because in rugby league, it's very defence biased, sport in a lot of ways. So I felt, right, you know what, although I'm not an expert of rugby union, I'm an expert coach, and I feel like, I've got great experience as a coach, and I feel like I'm an expert teacher. So that's how I can help them. So I learn a lot about putting yourself out there, understanding the group. Like, what did the group need from me? Me not coming in and having all the answers. What did the group need from me? Looking at individuals. Who can I help? Who can I build a relationship and rapport with here? What can I learn from Eddie? And so that was sort of a great experience. I learn a whole heap there working with England Rugby and Eddie and the staff there.
So you mentioned something really interesting there, which is around the individual and the team. So you've mentioned this throughout this conversation as well. But when you're coaching a team, how do you create a program to manage and create a really high performance culture within a team, but at the same time create individual and tailored training programs for individuals, because everyone's different and they learn differently?
Yeah.
How do you balance the two?
Yeah, well, talk about the learning styles. Like you're right. So we've got we have some guys who are visual learners, some guys who learn by doing, some guys who learn by writing, so we've got to try and cater for all those things. So we have notebooks. Not everyone writes notes, but if you want to write notes, if that's your thing, you write notes. So we give them a notebook. They bring it to the meetings. Some guys don't use it. Some guys do use it, but it's up to an individual thing. Rather than make it compulsory, you've got to write notes. No, it's not like that. You've got a book. If that's your thing, do that. If you're a visual learner, we try and use graphics on the screen, so not much writing on anything, so just, three little, pictures or the vision. We put highlights, like spotlight on players and so on. So it, drags their eye, or for the doers, they get to learn it on the field, right? So we're trying to cater for everyone's learning styles. So that's one thing what we do learning-wise. The second thing with regards to the tailoring for individuals, I think is really important that as a head coach, we've got about 40 full-time players. And some of my interaction with a player on a particular day might be just shaking their hand, saying, how are you, mate? You good? That might be my only interaction with a player. But what we're really deliberate about doing, and I learned this from England Rugby, is about how you give roles and responsibilities to your staff. So each of my staff members have a primary role. So again, a guy called Jimmy Dimmick, who was a legend player of the game, really experienced coach, good man, like very, very good man, very experienced coach. So Jimmy's our team defence, right? That's his primary role. But his secondary role is looking after our middle forwards, which is a particular positional group. So the middle forwards know that on a day-to-day basis, Jimmy's their nuts and bolts. He's the guy that's going to help them improve, whether it's by drill design, by video, by one-on-one catch-ups. That's the go-to man. One of our other coaches, Stephen Hales, he's our team attack coach. That's his primary responsibility. And when we're looking at our attack, I'm going to Hales, how are you going to improve it? Like where do we go to next? So I'm challenging him as a coach. But his secondary responsibility is the outside backs. And so they're another positional group, so that the outside backs know on a day-to-day basis, Halsey's their man. They go to Halsey for their one-on-one catch-ups, for their video, drill design at the end of sessions, when they're doing their craft and so on. He's their man. So being really deliberate around roles and responsibilities of the staff, I think that's how you can cater for individuals. Because if I try to do everything, then I'm doing nothing, because 40 players, you've only got so much time in a day. So I think that's one of the things I did learn from Eddie and how he structured his staff with England. I think I've been really deliberate around that. So again, there might be better ways to do it, but that's our way of doing it.
Yeah, providing dedicated focus and attention.
Yeah.
And also a great opportunity for your staff and your extended team as well to build their leadership capabilities and develop specialised experience in different areas of the game. Paul Devlin, who you've worked with at a couple of different clubs, including the Melbourne Storm, I've shared with you, he speaks incredibly highly of you, and I had him on this show as well. He mentioned a key coaching principle he learnt from you, which was your focus on learning retention and memory science.
Yeah.
Can you give me an example of where, first of all, where did you really learn about learning retention and memory science, and then how do you apply this with the team?
Yeah, okay. So first of all, being a teacher, I was a teacher for probably only about 4.5 years at different times because of my playing career. But once I finished, I spoke about going back to the Clydesdales and the Broncos experience. I actually then went and worked at university for 18 months, and it was the University of Southern Queensland. And so I was a lecturer in the Faculty of Education. Essentially, I was teaching teachers. And the fancy word, or the technical word, is pedagogy. And pedagogy is the how-to, how to teach and so on. And so that was a starting point, So I was a teacher, then I was a university lecturer teaching the teachers. So that sort of set me up, understanding how important it is with regards to not how much you know, but how much the students or, the people in front of you.
How much they retain.
Yeah, how much they learn.
Yeah.
And so that sort of set me up. Then I've been lucky enough to have some really good teachers like John Dixon. I spoke about him at the Broncos, ex-teacher, like really, really good, with regards to teaching fundamentals and so on. Eddie Jones, ex-teacher, brilliant. Craig Bellamy, although not a teacher by certification, one of the best teachers in that I've seen, because he uses metaphors, analogies, theming and all that sort of stuff. So I've had all these wonderful experiences. But one of the things that we did get was he's considered the world's best teacher. His name's Doug Lemov, and he's based over in New Jersey. And Doug's got some brilliant books. So if you just Google Doug Lamov, you'll see he's got books for coaches, books for teachers. So if anyone is interested in this, just Google Doug. But Eddie used to get Doug to come into the England rugby team and he'd spend a week with us at a time every campaign. And so he would critique you and appraise you on my meetings and my delivery and et cetera, et cetera. And so, again, I've sort of had this opportunity to learn from you talk about elite coaches or master teacher. Like Doug's a master teacher. So I think all these things have shaped me. Long story short, one of the things I have learned is if you chase 5 rabbits, you get none. Right. So if you go after a whole heap of things, you're not going to retain that information. And so being really deliberate when you go into a meeting, what's the one, maybe 2 things, 3 absolute tops, right, that you want the players or the staff to walk away from. So that's being intentional about what learning you want to happen in the meeting.
So first, those few key messages that you really want.
So this is the learning intentions. These are 1, 2, or 3 things. And I mean 3 things absolute tops. These are the things that we want you. If you're going to walk out of this meeting and I tap you on the shoulder and say, "Hey, hey Turbo, what's your couple of takeaways?" You would want them to repeat those things. And if you do that, that's success. If they say something different, you haven't got your meeting right. Okay. So, but that's been really deliberate around your learning intentions. The second part of that is how long your meetings are. Like all current research is around long meetings. People get disinterested or they lose focus and so on. So just about, if there's 2 points you're really going to go after, how are you going to deliver those 2 points? How are you going to involve the group? Because it's not what I know, it's what they know. So I'm big on asking questions. I'm big on turn and talk. Like Doug Lamov had this great sort of little strategy about engaging people. Turn and talk, you got 1 minute. What's your key takeaway from that clip there? Turn and talk. So all of a sudden you hear all this chatter in the group. And if someone gets it wrong, then they can correct them. Because one of the things in meetings and about learning is psychological safety. If you put someone on show, they will lose confidence. And one of the things, in different groups I've been part of, you go in there, you ask a question and everyone's looking, to try and not get eyes with you because they're not comfortable because they've been, hammered in the past for getting something wrong. It's not about getting something wrong. It's about, how can we help each other here? So use of questions, turn and talks, write down your most important point or, tell the person next to you your most important point. But the big thing is this, and this is that learning and retention, is checking for understanding. I think you need to have strategies how you check for understanding because I can deliver the best speech in 5 minutes, but it's what you understand from what I've spoken about. So that's why it's really important that you check for understanding. So how you exit a meeting, and as I said, it might be write down your most important point and tell your mate beside you, or write down your most important point, leave it on the desk, because then we can check for understanding, did they get what we wanted out of the meeting? So there's all these, little strategies that you can use. But then the other thing is retrieval. So if you just think you've spoken about it once, they know that was a great meeting, I delivered a great meeting, but you don't retrieve the information, then what happens is the enemy of learning is forgetting, right? So you need to retrieve. So when you talk about the science, there's all these things, learning intentions, the use of questioning, checking for understanding, but then retrieval. And one of the things that the latest research is around retrieval, you need to retrieve things like 2-3 times a week for it to really embed in someone's learning.
So when you're testing for retrieval, I'm assuming you would have then processes or ways that you'll test or have checkpoints to see if the knowledge is retained or retrieved over that period of time.
Yeah, and not necessarily in a meeting. So what if you say, okay, this is what we're going to go after this week. This is the 2 or 3 things that we think can beat the Bulldogs this week, right? So that's your starting point at the beginning of the week in a meeting, and then you'll check for understanding through the use of questions or turn and talk, or okay, what's your key point, Turbo, or what's your key point, Chaz, or Jake, or Hamole, what's your key point that you're going to take away from this meeting? So you're checking for understanding, but then you go and retrieve it on the field, going right, okay, how we said this is how the Bulldogs are going to play and this is how we're going to try and disrupt them. Okay, this is that opportunity now. Let's see if we can do it out on the field. So being really deliberate, not just doing it once, not just saying it once and think, well, they should know it. I told them all the information.
It's reinforcement learning.
Yeah, because this is the thing. I always talk about competitive advantage, right? Like everyone does meetings. Everyone looks at video. Everyone's week looks roughly the same, right? But the competitive advantage can be the learning, right? So how you embed the learning or how the players Don't forget the information that you're trying to deliver. And that's why I feel it's really important as a coach. If I want to be the best version of myself, I've got to be really good at delivering messages, not too many messages. What do we need to take away from the meeting, and being really deliberate and spending time doing that. And one of the challenges that I challenge my staff with is, don't be me. You don't have to ask questions, or you don't have to do turn and talks, or you don't have to use the strategy of, write down the most important thing, or tell, your mate next to you the most important thing. Come up with the two ways that you're going to check for understanding that you're comfortable with, right? So I wouldn't expect Jimmy Dimmick to use my strategies, because Jimmy's different to me. He presents different to me. But what he does need to do is come up with a strategy or two strategies that work for him. And so that's the challenge to my coaches.
And they tie back into that vision that you set at the beginning of the week. And that's incredible, because it also empowers your staff to, do things their way. Like you said, you can only really be yourself and do things your way.
Yeah.
But it still allows them to connect to that team vision and the overall, well, you say retrieval, but reinforcement learning the team have throughout the week.
Yeah, because you think about it, right? Like if I present 3 points or 2 points at the beginning of the week, and then our attack coach gets up and presents 2 different points the next day, then a defence coach gets up and presents 2 different points the next day, there's 7 points. And then we don't retrieve anything on the field or through the use of questioning. Like the players have all of a sudden, they've got mixed messaging. So being really deliberate around, okay, this is our theme for the week. This is the key points. And we're going to start the week with those key points, and we're going to finish the week with those key points. In between, let's put the detail around those, those couple of key points.
No, it's fantastic, and thank you for elaborating on the examples. I think really powerful and cross-transferable principles that can really be applied across a lot of different fields, whether it be sport or business and other areas as well. Something else Paul mentioned is you do not waste anybody's time. So he says you are so prepared for every meeting. How do you prepare for meetings with the team?
I'm trying to be the best version of myself I can be. So I don't want to waste the players' time. I don't want to have a meeting for the meeting's sake, being really deliberate, like I said before, what's the intentions of the meeting? What's the 2 or 3 things? And it's the same with the staff. Like sometimes I'll send out an agenda to our staff. We have coaches meetings every day, 7:45, and the night before I'll send out an agenda. It might be 5 or 6 points, that we need to cover in a coaches meeting, so because some of the points, an assistant coach might need to present or so on. So making sure that they're across that. Sometimes they don't. Sometimes, go back to that chaos theory of coming in and then sort of, okay, well, have it on the whiteboard when they come in, but they haven't seen it before. So being really deliberate around that. But yeah, I think it's really important preparing for meeting, because I don't want to waste anyone's time, and everyone else's time is just as important as my time. So, a couple of things I expect is that you be on time to, if there's a meeting, and that, you know your stuff, that you're prepared. So if an assistant coach is presenting, I don't want them to waste my time either. And I'm, really deliberate around giving feedback if I feel like someone is, wasting my time or hasn't prepared well. So, but it's all good. It goes back to time's precious, be as organised as possible, and then you'll get the most out of that meeting or that appointment or whatever it is. Yeah.
This might tie into really well to what you were just saying, but you've often been described as being obsessed with getting better. How do you instill that mindset in the players and staff around you? Yeah,
well, I think by being deliberate around it and through my actions, again, I'm going across to the States in the next couple of weeks, and Paul Devlin's organised me a couple of organisations to go and see. Look, if there's one thing that I can take away that can help me be a better coach or help our program be better, then for me that's gold, right? So I think one of the things that helps me with creativity is looking at other environments and what are they doing there in their meetings, what are they doing there on the field, or what are they doing there with their coach catch-ups, or how are they reviewing their sessions. And as I said, I'm always sort of looking for better ways to do things. Like I feel like, where it's almost like 80-20, right? Like we feel like we're 80%, doing things really well, but what's the 20% that we can add to our program, adapt, change, and that's sort of what I'm always sort of looking for. What's that sort of 20% that we can, help us help us have a better program, make us better staff, coaches, players, etc. Yeah.
You're always looking for those 1% improvements.
Yeah,
you can make incrementally. That over time compound. And what they look like in practice is you are in the finals and you have a chaotic moment. and it's the way that the team reacts. It's not randomised at all.
Yeah.
A lot of that comes from that just consistent high standard that you're employing on a daily basis.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that's part of your job as a leader, like to try and get better. And as I said, I'm really deliberate about that. And the players know that myself and other staff go away and do professional development. I think it's important. And we try and get our leaders to, we sent our leaders to Carlton and Collingwood last year to have a look at what their leaders are doing and how they lead and so on. And it's helping our leaders to get better, not by me just sitting them down saying you've got to be a better leader here or you need to do this. Go and actually look at other environments. And I know Daly Cherry Evans and Tom Trebojevic and Luke Brooks, they got a heap out of going down and looking at some other leaders and some other groups.
No, it's inspiring as well to do so. You get out of your own environment. Yeah. Almost it's like getting out of your own head and just seeing different perspectives of how others do things really well. Yeah. What's been the proudest moment of your career?
Well, the proudest moment of my career is, I suppose, getting this third opportunity as a head coach. As I said, I had a really positive, probably first decade, 12 years of my coaching career. And then it was a bit bumpy there up in Brisbane. And I think a lot of people probably thought I'd never be a head coach again. And as I said, I took a bit of time out of the game. And so to get the opportunity back at Manly I was really proud that I love the vocation of coaching, and whether people think I'm a good coach, bad coach, or somewhere in between, that's not my issue. I just try and be me, don't try and be another coach, and try and do things my way. And I'm proud that I've been able to stay at it, persevere, be resilient with regards to a lot of the criticism and social media harassment that I had to endure and come out the other side of it. So I'm really proud of that, and I'm enjoying coaching as much as I ever have. I've got a good group of people there, both staff and players. We're not perfect, but we've made some big strides. But I'm really proud that I stayed at it and that I've worked towards getting another opportunity as a head coach. And it's been 2 years back at Manly, and I feel like that's probably my proudest moment.
Oh, that's really amazing to hear, and it's often how we rebound after our biggest setbacks that really define what we make out of those learnings. And there's no learning that you can get that's as big as a loss or a really tough time that you go through, because what that teaches you when you come out the other side is just incomparable to, like you said earlier in your career, you had all these wins, you're flying on a high.
Yeah.
Until you really get knocked down with tough experiences. That's when you truly kind of learn it, and you come out better for it as well. Yeah. Oh, look, I learned way more from, I'll call it a failure up at Brisbane than any time in my life or career. And, the learnings I've had since then have been really profound. At the end of the day, I wouldn't have coached England rugby if I didn't go through that pain, what I call pain up there in Queensland. I wouldn't have had this opportunity at Manly. I wouldn't have worked, as I said, with England rugby and, coaching the Six Nations and tours and all, against the Springboks and the All Blacks and all these really cool experiences, which I've learned a whole heap from. So things happen for a reason, but I certainly learnt more from the failures and the hurdles than I have through the little sort of successes I've had. No, absolutely. And when you look back at your career so far, both with Manly and throughout your entire journey, what do you hope your legacy will be? How do you want to be remembered by your teams and the players that you've worked with?
Well, that's a really difficult one because, again, what other people sort of say about you, that's sort of, I'm not in control of that. But I'd love to say that, look, I'm a decent person first and foremost, and that I want to get better, And so my whole motivation getting up every day is to try and be the best coach I can be. As I said before, I'm not Wayne Bennett, I'm not Craig Bellamy, I'm not Ivan Cleary, I'm myself. I try and be the best version of myself, and I would just like the players and the staff that work with me. He's a decent person, and he always try to get better.
No, it's some great advice. I listened to this recently, but it was a business leader who said, at the end of your life, he's like, the one thing I want to do is look back and be proud of the decisions I made throughout the course of my life. And he said, my opinion of myself is by far the most important, and you kind of self-reflect on that in a way. because that's what brings you fulfillment and joy, as you kind of having an impact on the people around you as well.
Yeah, definitely, yeah.
Last question. What is the best piece of advice you would give to anyone for high performance, whether in sport or any other field? So anyone that's looking for betterment or self-improvement, what would you leave them with?
Yeah, well, the two things is being curious, like how can you get better? You know, whether it's looking at a different program, you know, different athlete, you know, different way of doing things. So be curious. And the other thing is persevere. Like you can't get to where, like anyone who's had success has had to persevere, you know, and I look at Ivan Cleary as a fantastic example and role model as a coach because, you know, he had to endure a little bit. You know, he got sacked by Penrith. Things didn't quite work out at Tigers. His first year back at Penrith, they didn't make the playoffs, but all of a sudden they've just gone on this run. So he had to persevere, obviously get better. So, you know, that's someone that you look at, you know, in my own profession. Then you look at players who have had to endure, and you know, someone like in our environment, like Tom Trbojevic, you know, he stands out for resilience. He's just been picked for the Australian side after a 6-year absence. He's had to persevere, be resilient through a whole host of injuries, and every time he gets injured, it's back page news or the lead story on the sports, you know, on the nightly news and so on. So they're two examples of, you know, that perseverance and being curious and wanting to get better. Like, you know, Turbo went over to America, try and get better. Is there a better way to do my recondition? You know, his reconditioning and so there's some real life examples. But I'd just say be curious and persevere.
Anthony, thank you so much. You really epitomise what it means to be someone who's a high performer, both in your mindset and the way that you approach not only your own playing career, but now the way that you're coaching other teams. You've shared a wealth of knowledge that I'm sure others can take a lot away from. So thank you so much. I've really enjoyed having this conversation with you.
No, thank you. Thanks for having us. It's great to chat.
Thanks for tuning in to this episode of Moonshot. If you felt inspired today and are curious about taking your own personal growth to the next level, check out my performance coaching website at leadwithtatjana.com. For more insights, stories, and behind-the-scenes content, follow me on Instagram at tatjana.moonshot. And if you have guest suggestions or topics you'd like explored, send me a DM. I'd love to hear from you. See you soon for another inspiring conversation that might just be the catalyst to the growth you've been seeking.